In this video, I'm checking out the new Tamron 28-75 G2. Now, this is a very important lens for Tamron because the original version, which I have right here, came out about 3 years ago, and it became the fastest selling, best-selling lens of all time. It was a great success for Tamron, and it was very good, and to this day, this original version is very good, but Tamron has updated this lens and it's only been 3 years. Let's get into giving you a tour around this new Tamron. This lens comes packaged in typical Tamron fashion in a white box with manuals, a warranty, a plastic front and rear lens cap, and a plastic lens hood. Now let's get to the lens body itself. Side by side with the original lens, the G2 looks very familiar, but it is more modern. In fact, this G2 makes me wonder if Tamron will modernize the fairly recently released 17-70mm for APS-C, because that would be cool. The G2 just feels better. It's hard to describe because the weight is about the same and the dimensions are about the same, but the plastic itself has a shinier, more premium finish. The zoom and focus rings have much grippier rubber on them, and the shape of the lens body with a little curvature in the middle and sharper angles towards the lens mount, all of this makes a difference. Starting at the rear, there is a metal mount, electronic connections because this lens has autofocus and an awesome autofocus at that. There is a rubber gasket around the mount, and I count about 7 total rubber gaskets to make this lens moisture resistant. Moving forward, there is a bit of information here. This lens is made in Japan, and you can tell the fit and finish is impeccable. There is a USB Type-C port here, which is an interesting addition. Yes, it is moisture resistant as well. With this port and Tamron's new lens utility software, you can customize this lens in crazy ways. You can reverse the direction of the focus ring, you can make the focus ring control the aperture, you can make it focus in a linear fashion, and the list goes on. It's a great addition that allows you to fine-tune this lens to work better with your style of shooting. Here there is a focus ring that is just as smooth as the old model, but it feels twice as good because of the rubber grip that is so much grippier and better textured. Next up, there is a button, similar to a focus hold button, but in this case it is more customizable and it can do a number of different functions. Watch out, G-Master. There is some branding on the top and the middle of the lens, and around the back the new A063 model number, 67mm filter thread, and designed in Japan. Now on to the zoom ring. It is nicer than the old one in 3 ways. The first, the grip is better. Second, the rotation is more linear, requiring barely any extra torque towards the end of the rotation. And third, the inner barrel extension is shorter, so it's just a little bit better for gimbal work. Around the front, this is a clean lens. No text here, large front lens element, and again, 67mm filter thread. Now inside the G2, there are a couple of big improvements. The structure of the lens, that is the internal lens elements, are all new. The original lens has 15 elements in 12 groups, while the G2 has 17 elements in 15 groups. And Tamron is using some fancy proprietary coatings here with the G2 that help with ghosting and flaring. The other very important improvement is the autofocus motor. The original 28-75 has a stepper motor, but the G2 has a faster linear motor driving the autofocus, which means it is accurate, silent, and about twice as fast as the original when focusing from infinity to macro, that is according to Tamron. Mounted on my A7C, this is an excellent pairing. It looks good, it feels good, it's lightweight, and this lens with its 28-75mm zoom range will cover you in about 90% of shooting situations. So I'll say this again, the original Tamron 28-75 was never a slouch. It was an excellent lens when it came out, and to this day it is still an excellent performer. So I wanted to see how the new G2 stacks up, so I did a couple of comparison photos. Let's jump into those. And the results from both lenses are excellent. Now don't pay attention to the labels at the top. For some reason my computer is labeling the original lens as the new A063 model for whatever reason. I took one shot after the other in order, so the original 28-75 will be on the left and the G2 will be on the right. Both lenses are nice and sharp in the center of the frame for portrait work. You really can't tell that there is much of a difference in sharpness wide open. On the wide end at 28mm and wide open, there is a marginal improvement in chromatic aberration from the G2, but it's not a huge improvement. The corners themselves and the edges do look a little bit sharper on the G2. In terms of bokeh, the G2 seems to produce slightly smoother bokeh, but the difference also is subtle. The original 28-75 28-75 has some outlines in many bokeh situations, which you can call soap bubbles, you can call onion rings, whatever you want to call them, whereas the G2 seems to have reduced outlines, which is good. Stopping the lens down to f4, both lenses are razor sharp in the center of the frame. At 75mm and wide open, there is a slight improvement in sharpness in the center, but you have to be zoomed in at 2:1 to really notice it. In terms of flare performance, neither the original nor the G2 are excellent when you shoot into the sun, as you can say about most any other lens out on the market, but the shape of the flare on the G2 is cool looking in this shot. It's so complicated and you could see all of the different reflections from the numerous lens elements. But overall, in terms of performance wide open, at least in the center of the frame, there was almost no difference between these two lenses. But then I wanted to test this further. I wanted to see what happens in the corners, at least wide open, with both of these lenses. So I set up a little testing area and I put real money on the line in the form of Janessa's credit card up on a wall in our living room, and here are the results. I focused both lenses on the credit card itself, and as you can see here, there is a clear improvement in overall sharpness with the G2 in the corners. I repeated this test a second time and the results were the same. In the center, there isn't much of a difference, but in the corners, there is an improvement without question. So using this lens out in the wild was amazingly good. It feels well balanced, it feels well built, the autofocus is impressive, it's very smooth, very accurate, silent, and it tracks the eye very, very well, especially for portraits, but even in video, it does an impressive job. Now, if you want to see a more in-depth example of what this lens is capable of in terms of video eye tracking, I filmed my entire Zhiyun Crane M3 little gimbal review with this camera body, the A7C, and this new G2 from Tamron, and I thought that the results were simply amazing. It looked really, really good. So this new Tamron 28-75 G2 really is the perfect walk-around lens if you have a full-frame Sony mirrorless camera. Now, there are obviously other competitors out on the market. Primarily, you have the G Master, the expensive Sony 24-70, which is a $2,200 lens. Back in the day, it used to be that third-party lenses from companies such as Tamron and Sigma were looked down upon because the autofocus performance was really the major issue. It was never quite as accurate, it was never as fast, and it was never as quiet as what you got with a native lens from something like Sony. And so people ended up spending more money for the native lens. But with these new lenses, especially the ones coming out from Sigma recently and the ones from Tamron, there really is no reason for most people to spend double the money, or in some cases more than double the money, for a lens that is not going to perform any better than a third-party lens. I think that this Tamron G2, in terms of autofocus performance, is just as good as any native Sony lens for Sony mirrorless full-frame cameras. So it's a great lens and I would highly recommend it. And I will mention there is a Sigma 24-70 art lens, which I have not reviewed yet for a full frame, that definitely competes with this, but it's a couple $100 more expensive than this Tamron. And I do think, based on what I've been reading on the internet, that the autofocus performance of that lens is just a touch below this Tamron G2. So, do I recommend this lens? Absolutely yes. In fact, this is a loaner that Tamron sent to me for review, and I emailed them just a couple of days ago and I said, hey, I'd really like to buy this for my own personal collection. And I don't really shoot full frame very often. I mean, I rarely use my A7C. I really shoot primarily with APS-C cameras anyway, but this is the perfect walk-around lens. The performance is excellent, and so I would highly recommend it. Now, is it worth upgrading over the original? You have to look at it this way. Just the build alone, in my opinion, is worth the upgrade. On top of that, you get a focus motor that is newer, twice as fast and more accurate, a better internal optical structure, a multifunction button, USB Type-C port with customizable options, smoother bokeh, and sharper corner-to-corner sharpness. And the thing that brings it all together is the price of $899 US, which is about, what, $20 more expensive than the original. You are getting astonishing performance for the price, so bang for buck is definitely excellent here. So that is going to be it for my review of the Tamron 28-75 G2. I hope you guys enjoyed it and you learned something from it. Special thank you to Tamron for sending this lens out for review. I'm sorry that I can't send it back, but I really do like it a whole lot. If you guys are interested in checking out more specs or buying this lens, I'll have some links down in the description below, so please check those out. As always, thank you so much for all of your comments, all of your likes, and your support. Stay tuned for more, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.